The new year often provides a moment, I think. There's a lot of things that we tend to think about when we get to the new year. It provides a moment for us to stop and just consider where we are in life, maybe, with where we thought we would be. And there are moments when I look around at my life today and I wonder, how did I get here? And don't get me wrong, I love where we are. I love the life that I get to live. In fact, I could go into detail about how this being in not obviously we love the Waverly Church of Christ, but even just being in Waverly has been some of the best opportunities for my family that we've had probably anywhere we've been. And so we love the area. We love this church. We're so thankful to be here. But if I'm being honest, this isn't exactly how I thought things would unfold. Like if you were to ask 16, 17, 18-year-old Derek, this is not what I necessarily pictured. This isn't the timing. It's not the path. And even to think about some of the challenges over the last year, certainly not things that I ever dreamed up. So some of the steps that brought me to this point weren't on any kind of a list that I personally made, and several times on this journey that I've been blessed with. Oftentimes I'm left with more questions than I am confidence. And if I'm being honest, there are seasons that I think this is true of all of us, seasons of life where I certainly would have preferred something else, a comfort over a calling, or certainty over surprise. But as our year faith focus in 2026, but God, and God had different plans. And because hindsight is 2020, I can see now that it's not because I had it all figured out, not because I was especially brave, not because of any of that. It is all because God has continued and will continue to be faithful. It's because God is faithful that I'm blessed to land where I am today. It's because God redirected my path. It's because He opened doors that I didn't even know existed. When I came to Waverly Church of Christ the first time in 2011, Liz is fixing me. In 2011, we came from Adams County, and I didn't know that anything existed east of Peebles. I just thought the world just came to an end, I didn't know there was anything this way, right? So I didn't even know that things existed this way, right? And because of that, because He's always been faithful, He's directed my paths. When I read Genesis 12, I hear that same moment in Abraham's life. And God didn't give Abraham a map like here's where you're going and here's how you're going to get there and here's, take a left turn at that, pond or whatever. He gave him a mission, right? He gave him a task. And we're told that Abraham went. This morning, I want to invite you to consider 3 practices that allowed Abraham to continue to move on mission with God. These aren't just things that Abraham believed, right? They're not just things that he held within himself, but they're the ways in which he learned to live as he followed God forward. Consider in your Bibles with me what we find in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 8. Hebrews 11 and verse 8. It says, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. The first practice that I think we find in Abraham's life is that Abraham went by faith. If you got that outline, it's in the bulletin. You can follow along with it as we go. Fill in some blanks with me if you'd like. By faith. Well, what is faith? Well, previously in verse 1 of this same chapter, the Hebrew writer confirms that faith is the assurance of things hoped for. It's the conviction of things not seen. And that brings us to an important point, I think, concerning faith and what faith does. This idea that faith is the assurance of things hoped for, it's the conviction of things that you can't see, right? Faith allows us to see the impossible. Now, I want you to think, if you're familiar with Abraham and who Abraham was, who was Abraham before God called him? Like, have you ever thought about that? Like what was, when God made this plan with Abraham, what was God working with? Right? If you think about it, Abraham was landless, right? He was without land. Abraham was childless, right? He had no children. And Abraham was old. And yet, what did God promise? Well, God promised Abraham, in spite of himself, land and children and blessings. And what an impossible promise for God to make. Like we have some older folks, right, here this morning, and I'm imagining that as you get to a certain age, you're not planning on having any children anytime soon, right? That's kind of not in the picture any longer. Right? And so it really is impossible that God would even say this. Like, God said that if Abraham would follow him, he would make this old man and his barren wife, like his wife had never had kids before. She was never able to have kids before. And she was going to make them into a great nation. And I just imagine Abraham just, maybe his jaw just dropping to the floor for a minute. Right? Like God... That's impossible. Like, don't you know who you're talking to? It's me. It's Abraham. Don't you realize who you've chosen for this supposed mission that you've sent me on? Like, did you forget maybe who I am and where I've been? And yet we read in Hebrews 11 and verse 8 that by faith Abraham obeyed. See, that's because Abraham's faith allowed him to see the impossible. Number two, we see that faith moves. Faith moves. In Genesis 12 and in Hebrews 11 both confirm that by faith Abraham went. Right? Abraham moved. I just want you to imagine for a moment, and these are all just silly conjectures. So like we don't know this. But just imagine for a moment how different things might have turned out, not just for Abraham, not just for Sarah, but also for all the family. You remember there in Hebrews chapter 12, I think it's like verse 3, or Genesis 12 and verse 3, that God told Abraham that through him all the families of the earth would be blessed. Right? And so just imagine how different things might have been, not just for Abraham, not just for Sarah, but also for all the families of the earth, who were going to be blessed through him, had Abraham not faithfully moved forward in this moment. Everything we know would be drastically affected had Abraham not acted on his faith. Right? Like Isaac would have never been born. Jacob would have never been born because Isaac was never born. Most of what's written in our Bibles, especially in the Old Testament, would cease to be true or even exist. The nation of Israel would cease to exist. There'd be no Jewish nation. Great kings, including David and Solomon, would have never been born. Thus, the Messiah would have never come from the line of David because there would be no line of David. Right? He would have never been born in the town of David because, again, there is no David to be a town of David. Now, had Abraham not obeyed at this single moment in history, it's very likely that our lives and our faith would be completely different than they are today. Now, I recognize, right? we serve an infinite, powerful God everywhere, all the time, omniscient. He's all-knowing. Right? God certainly would have worked things out another way had Abraham not obeyed. But man, aren't you glad that he didn't have to? Right? Like he didn't have to figure something else out because by faith, Abraham moved. I think the old preacher had it right when he said that faith and works right? We could say faith and faithfulness, right, are inseparable. As inseparable as the sun is the sunlight. Faith is the sun and faithfulness are its rays. You see, a faith that doesn't move, faith that doesn't cause you to do something, it isn't a faith that's going to survive. Then I want to point out one more thing about this faith, and this is encouraging. That is that faith always wins. Like when we remain faithful, there will always be victory. Now, that victory may not always be the way that we expect. Sometimes the promises feel delayed. The outcome could be unclear. The path might be longer than what we imagined it would be. But faith is never wasted. Because God is always accomplishing what He intended to accomplish in our faith. See, Abraham didn't see everything from the start. He didn't see everything. And in fact, he didn't see everything fulfilled in his lifetime. But his faith carried him exactly where God wanted him to be. You know, as Paul was nearing the end of his life, he said in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, he's talking to Timothy as he's coming toward the end of his own life, and he says this. This is such encouragement for all of us to continue to remain faithful. He says, I have fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, not only to me, but also to all who have loved or longed for His appearing. It reminds me of the old hymn we maybe used to sing. Faith is the victory. Faith is the victory that overcomes the world. It may not win on my timeline. May not be exactly as I planned. But it always wins on God's. And so by faith, Abraham obeyed. Second practice that I want to point out to you from Abraham's life, the thing that allowed him to continue to move forward, is that he moved forward without fear. Again, we read in the second half of Hebrews chapter 11 that he went out, and listen to this is important, not knowing where he was going. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're leaving home forever, right, you're leaving where you thought you belonged forever, not knowing where you're going. That is a scary venture. And yet Abraham went by faith. See, it takes a faith greater than fear to move forward. The other night, Kinsley and I arrived early to the New Year's Eve party that we had here at the church. And just an interesting thing happened when we were here. We got here a little bit early to get some things prepared, and with her hand in mine, she and I walked back from the fellowship hall to my office. Or at least that was until we met a room that was completely pitch black. You see, the dark stopped her dead in her tracks. She could not and would not take another step forward until the lights were turned on in that room. Even with the reassurance of what I assume and hope would make her feel protected as her hand is in mine, fear stopped her feet. And see, I think there's an important lesson that I think is worthy of our reminder. You might even write this down if you're looking at that outline. Fear is the most common enemy of moving forward. Fear is the thing that will stop you most of the time. We start in January with all of these different New Year's resolutions, right? And some of those things, especially the scary ones, often aren't accomplished because it just seems like it's just a little bit too much. And just a little bit too much for me to do. You know the difference between fear and faith? Fear is focused on what might happen. Yet faith focuses on who's already there, even if it does happen. You see, fear says, but what if? Well, what if there's something in the dark that I cannot see? Well, what if there's someone lurking where I'm no longer able to see them? Well, what if? But faith says, even if, I know that God is with me. Right? That's the difference. Even if I know my Father is there. Daniel chapter 3, King Nebuchadnezzar erects this massive golden image, and he commands that everyone in the empire is to bow down and worship whenever the music is played. The threat is clear and immediate. He basically says anyone who refuses to worship this idol that he's created is going to be thrown into a blazing, burning, fiery furnace. And yet Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, friends of Daniel, are reported to the king for their refusal. Right? They're refusing to bow down. And upon further threats, right, upon King Nebuchadnezzar looking and basically pointing his finger in their faces and listen, if you do not bow down, I'm going to throw you in that furnace and you're going to burn alive. I love the boldness of their faith without fear. Now look at it with me. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, we're not in need of an answer to give you concerning this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. And here's where the real faith comes in. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods, nor worship the golden statue that you have set up. And so while fear is left wondering about all the what ifs, right? Well, what if this happens? What if? Faith says, even if my Father is already there. Now, let me just clarify something really quick before we move on. Fear itself, fear on its own doesn't disqualify you from remaining faithful. But refusing to move because of fear, that will. And so we can continue by faith and without fear because we know that our God is greater than our every fear. Then the third posture, the practice that I want to invite you to consider from Abraham's life is that he continued to move forward. Continue in your Bibles with me, if you have that open to Hebrews chapter 11, and what we find specifically in verses 9 and 10. It says, by faith he went out to live in the land of promises in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. I want you to recognize just two directions in which Abraham continued to move forward. Right, two directions in which Abraham continued to move in the direction that God was calling him. Number one, Abraham moved forward toward God's promise. You see, Abraham kept moving forward because his life was anchored in what God had already promised him, and not in what he could already see. Right? If Abraham only moved as far as he was able to see, and as far as he was able to see what was going to happen next, he wouldn't have got very far. Right? Every step he took was in response to God's word, trusting that obedience would always lead him closer to God's purpose for his life. In the same way, our motivation to move forward isn't found in any kind of a certainty. Right? Again, if we're only going to move forward into what God is calling us to, whenever we know exactly what's going to happen next, we're never really going to get very far in our faith with God. Right? Our moving forward, our forward movement isn't based in any kind of a certainty. It's not based in comfort, right? We're never told that the Christian life is going to be comfortable. It's in a willingness to, even in the things that are uncertain and uncomfortable, to still trust and obey. For when we move toward God's promise, we discover that obedience itself, just living obedient to God, is actually the path that He's called us to. Number two, not only was Abraham moving toward God's promise, but he was also moving to a new home. He was moving toward a new home. You know, it's interesting, isn't it? Verse 9, if you remember what we read there in Hebrews chapter 11, it confirms that Abraham was living in the land of promise. He had arrived where he was going, but he was living there as if it was a foreign land. He was living as it says that his family lived in tents. And it's wild to me. It's crazy to me to think that after traveling all over the known world, right, that Abraham and his family would have lived in a new promised land like folks without a home. Why? Verse 10 explains that the physical promised land wasn't everything that Abraham was looking forward to. It says he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. You see, Abraham lived the life of a stranger because he knew that's just exactly who he was. This world was not his home. He was just passing through. You know, I love that God allowed John to get a glimpse of what the new home is going to look like. John wrote in Revelation chapter 21 the following. Just consider some of how he described this for us. Here's what he says. He says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had passed away or had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband." Continues, "As I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, 'Look, God's home is now among His people. He will live with them and they will be His people. God Himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever.' So He took me in the Spirit to a great and high mountain. He showed me the holy city of Jerusalem descending out of heaven from God. It shone with the glory of God, sparkled like precious stone, like jasper, as clear as crystal. The wall was made of jasper. The city was pure gold, as clear as glass. The 12 gates were made of pearls, each gate from a single pearl. And the main street was pure gold, as clear as glass. I saw no temple in the city, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. And the city has no sun or moon, for the glory of God illuminates the city. The Lamb is its light. The nations will walk in its light, and the kings of the world will enter the city in all their glory. Its gates will never be closed at the end of the day, because there is no night there. And all the nations will bring their glory and honor into the city. Nothing evil will be allowed to enter, nor anyone who practices shameful idolatry and dishonesty, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life." Now, I have to confess, I don't know if every image that John describes in Revelation 21 is literal or not. There's argument that John merely wrote what best described unity with God. Right, like what it would be like to actually live in complete unity in the presence of God. I don't know. Maybe it is completely literal. I don't know. I will say, whatever it is, it's going to be good. Right? Heaven is going to be good. And I would say this as well. I think it's safe to say that the destination, right, the place that as faithful Christians we remain faithful to God, we continue to move on mission for Him, the destination makes the journey worth it. Right? The destination makes the journey worth the while. It's most certainly true that it is a worthwhile endeavor for us to, by faith, without fear, continue to move forward. I want to confirm something as well, because sometimes it feels like like when we become Christians, we're scared. I've never even seen it. Is there a TV show or something, Scared Straight or something like that? I don't know what that is. Anyway, I've heard that before. But that sometimes we become Christians like that, right? We're so scared of hell, or we're so scared of the devil that we give in to God. I just want to confirm that we don't merely move forward because this world or because the devil is so bad. But I'm not saying that he isn't, because he is. But we move forward because God's future is so much better. You know, the end of 2025, it allows us to consider the past. And again, as I look back into my own past, I still cannot draw a straight line explaining how I got to where I am today. But I don't think Abraham could have done that either. He never saw the full picture. He never lived to see every promise fulfilled, and yet he kept moving forward by faith without fear because he trusted God. He trusted in the God who called him. And see, that's the invitation before us as a church today. We don't step into 2026 because we got all the answers. We don't move forward because we feel especially bold. My prayer would be that we would continue to move forward simply because we trust in a God who's always been faithful. And if the same God who called Abraham is still calling his people today, then we can take these next best steps together into 2026 by faith, without fear, trusting that wherever God leads us as a church, leads us as individual Christians, that His presence will be enough to continue to carry us forward. Would you join me in prayer?